Good afternoon, and this is another little session for 15 minutes of FMBE. Today I have a very special guest, following on a little bit with the environmental topics that we've already had within 15 minutes of FMBE. Certainly now one of those people who is an absolute leading light in the UK for the environmental topics. At the very appropriate time, as we emerge, as agencies emerge, it's my great pleasure to talk to Selina Donald and to hear about how we can make progress in this as an industry, perhaps taking best advantage of some of the things that we've been able to study and learn during lockdown and put them into practice at this present moment in time, to what we hope will be a really exciting summer of events and ongoing from there. But with no further ado, then here is my guest for today, Selina Donald. Welcome, Selina.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Selina runs a consultancy called The Bulb. We'll learn more about that as we go along. Let's hear a little bit, Selina, about how you have become this kind of, if I dare say it, something of a guru figure in the world of environment. So tell us how you got into that and where you got started.
I think that's really kind. I owe you a drink for that one. So I go all the way back to 2012 and the opening closing ceremonies for the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympic Games. I was part of the production team that put on those ceremonies and joined as employee, I think number 7 of the team. And part of my role was to manage the sustainability working group. And so throughout the ceremonies, through the whole production process, from development, creative concept, to procuring the right suppliers, to thinking about the afterlife of the ceremonies and the legacy, I was involved in all of that process. And it really stuck with me and made me think, how can we put on these 4 incredible, arguably the biggest shows in the world, but then those learnings don't filter down to a 100-person brand event. And it just didn't quite marry up for me. I went on and worked in-house for a brand. I worked at ITV, so broadcaster. I worked for an agency, and this idea just kept niggling at me. It's also a real personal passion of mine. And so I just decided to take the leap in 2015, and I set up the Bulb then. And we were there to offer a sustainable option to brands. So we were working with brands like ASOS and Lush and Shoe to produce their events in a sustainable way, looking at how we can reduce their environmental impacts. Over time, I've evolved that business model, and I realized what I really loved doing and what really fed my soul really was actually the sustainability side. And so taking the learnings from the Bulb, we were the first B corporation in the event industry, currently going through recertification at the moment, and taking those learnings and looking at how we formed our strategy and what worked in practice. I started to just work in consultancy and working with different agencies and brands and NGOs on creating strategies that work, on helping them design their events so they were more sustainable, and working through the process and the planning process and delivery with them, but as a consultant and advisory role. And that's where the Bulb is now. We work with different brands, we work with agencies on a global scale to help them create strategies that actually work. And I think being able to fuse that large scale event experience and brand experience with sustainability expertise means that we have quite a niche offering, a unique offering to different organizations who are being more mindful about the impacts their work has on the planet.
And you mentioned some brands along the way there from 2015. Who's driving the demand for this? Is it coming from brands, from agencies, a mixture of both?
I think it's coming from consumers. I think it's coming from your audiences. I know, like everyone I know, especially during lockdown, has taken a long, hard look at the way that we consume, what we're using, what auditing like how much plastic we use, and just demanding more transparency and accountability from brands. We've got certain brands like Coca-Cola who are always, I shouldn't say always, for the last 3 years have been named like the biggest polluting brand in the world because their product is found littering most countries, so wherever you go. And they recognize that that's their environmental impact, and they've gone away and they've created a world without waste strategy. And that strategy, I think, has 100% come about from consumer and NGO pressure on Coca-Cola to look at the way that they work and make their impact more positive. And so and then it's sort of a chain, isn't it? So consumers are putting pressure on brands are putting pressure on agencies, because they then, events are their public facing interaction with their consumers. So if their events aren't sustainable, then that's a PR nightmare. So then agencies now need to be more sustainable. So it's a kind of a little of a three-way sort of pressure pot of, we need to just be better and more responsible.
So to go back over what you've just said, you had a big learning curve in this country, which you were kind of in the forefront of in terms of 2012 and the Olympics, spotlight on the UK, maybe creating a bit of thought leadership opportunity. And then you talked about 2015 and some of the brands getting on board, driven by the consumers, as we just heard. And then how long after that is it that you come up with the idea of the bulb, and what does the bulb actually, you've given us a sustainable plan, but what does the bulb actually do within that context?
So when the bulb today, we work with agencies and brands to create their sustainability strategy. And I have an approach that I've sort of tailored over the years, which is looking, firstly, digging deep into the organisation itself, materiality assessment, looking at the landscape in which they operate, who are their clients, who are their competitors, and what are their impacts from their operations. So looking at their life cycle of how they approach a project, and each step of the way, really understanding, okay, this is where you've got the most emissions, this is your waste, this is where waste can be generated, this is where you're looking at transport and materials, and then being able to create a strategy informed by that process that really is tailored and bespoke to that organisation, and then helping them implement that through training, engagement, communications, looking at their operations, and then how they continually just keep that going, because that's the main thing, isn't it? When I leave, who keeps that going in an organisation? And that's my biggest thing, that I don't want to be the one holding this. It's got to be really taken on by the organisation, so helping them do that. And sorry, go on.
I was going to say, does that mean to say that obviously you leave with a champion or a championing team in place? Do they get a lot of pushback typically from other people within the marketing or the event team that say this is limiting us, or is it giving them bold horizons? What's the pushback normally?
I found, on a whole, people are very positive about this process, because I think personally a lot of people recognise that the world's changing, and that in order to be a successful business, you need to change and you need to adapt, and we need to be more resilient. And I think, if anything, the last 2 years have shown us that we need to definitely be a lot more resilient to big changes that are happening in the world. And climate change is one of them, and will be much bigger than COVID. I think there's a lot of noise around sustainability now, in the media and in documentaries and on Netflix and everywhere. So people get why we're doing it. Where you get the pushback and the challenge is when you're making changes to operations during a very busy time. So when people are up against time pressures with clients, and you're trying to make them do things a little bit differently to what the habit is, that's the challenge. And that's where I find the biggest pushback. Changing muscle memory and behavior change. is always the big one.
It's a nice way of putting it. And what does success look like after? Is it possible to assess what success looks like in this process?
Absolutely. I mean, success could be a certification like an ISO or a B Corp, which I work with clients on. Success for me is when you see clients winning awards for sustainable events. Success is when you see them like putting out thought leadership pieces and really like taking hold of like sustainability and showcasing them that they're doing it. And success and like putting out reports and just being transparent and accountable. I think like at the moment we're in a place where no one really knows the best way to do everything. We're all learning, and actually every few months something else changes, you know. So we're transitioning to electric vehicles. Is that better for the environment? Because then when you dig deep into the making of them, and yes, it's better for emissions, but is it better for resource and natural resources? You know, it's always those things, isn't it, that we're all just learning. And so I think being really open and transparent about your successes and your failings, I hate the word failings, but learnings is really important. And so yeah, all of those things together is just, it's really great to see a client owning sustainability as part of their culture as well, because I think that's a big thing.
Good. That's it's, as you say, failings is a tricky word to put onto anything.
Yeah.
But it's right to say it's a failure that we're going to learn from. I think that's then that certainly turns that negative around into a very obvious positive. And I'm guessing that positivity is part of the main vibe of doing this kind of work. It generates a positive buzz just hearing about it and getting involved with it. It's nice to know about.
Yeah, definitely.
So you and you came onto my radar. You've sort of been in the periphery there or thereabouts, but certainly in a more solid and identifiable way by joining the launch of a best practice scheme called Proseed, which you spoke about alongside this organisation, Isla, that has strongly taken off alongside the many of the agencies in the world of brand experience that I've come to know and love through the years. So obviously your involvement with that, I knew that this would have a strong appeal to broaden that message and to have a chance to talk to you today. So perhaps it'd be interesting to talk about how the Bulb became involved with Isla and what that potentially does for the members of that organisation.
Yeah, definitely. I was introduced to Anna maybe a couple of years ago now via a mutual contact, and that was when Isla was still in its conceptual stage, and we were just chatting very much about what her plans were for Isla, and I just thought it was brilliant and definitely something that the event industry needed. Like we need a body that can help us unify. We need one of my biggest things that I really come up against is actual stats on how unsustainable the event industry is, that are like not just made up that are just that, you know, like can actually have some like quantitative evidence behind, and I just can't ever find any. And if anyone's watching this and they know of some, please do share them. But I think the prospect of Isla just really excited me. And so I was just, very much on board and supportive of Anna and Ben and the team in setting up, contributed to Proseed and the writing Proseed, and contributed to the way that they're setting up Isla, but just being on hand to bounce ideas off, because, you know, like we said before, everyone's learning in this game, and it's just really important on projects that you have that, you know, trusted people that you can bounce ideas from. And I'm really incredibly proud of the team, of what they've achieved with Isla. I think it's brilliant, and it's exciting to see how it develops and comes further, you know, gets further down the road as well. The way that we work together is that when Isla has members that want a more strategic approach to sustainability, so want their own strategy, want to take Proseed and want to embed it into the way that they work and their operations, want to create just like more of a robust strategy to their sustainability approach, then the bulb comes in and I help them with that. So we work as a partnership. And so, yeah, so far, so good. It's worked really well. And it means that the client sort of gets the best of both worlds, because they get a consulting strategic approach from the bulb, and then also support on like the design of events. Like I have a sustainable materials database with well over 100 materials in that I can share with clients, and just maybe just best practices of what we've seen that works and what doesn't work. And then with Isla, you've got like the amazing training sessions. They've got the toolkits like Proseed and other things that are on the horizon to come out. And so it just works really well. I think we complement each other's skill sets quite well as a partnership.
That's very interesting. I've been immensely impressed with Isla. I would have no attachment to the organisation, so no reason to say anything other than it struck me as being really well put together. Launch of Proseed, the best practice issues seemed achievable and manageable. But the one, and I suppose kind of almost like a final question for you now, I imagine myself in a situation looking through all of that thinking, here I am, perhaps I'm an agency that has been doing other stuff during lockdown and slipped behind the curve a bit and going, yikes, all these people are doing all this environmental stuff. How approachable, what would a consultancy like the Bulb be able to do with an agency like that to get them up and running and moving in the right direction?
I mean, I think that, well, that's like the dream client really, because it's good to start with a blank sheet, isn't it? Always. But the first approach is just understanding who the agency is, what matters to them, what do they value, where are what impact do their operations have, and then being able to work with them to create a really informed strategy that's relevant, that is practical, and then using tools like Proseed to create an operations manual so that fits into what they already do. It fits into their approach. So every step of the way, rather than sustainability being an add-on, it should just be embedded in that project brief as a question, that design brief. When you're looking at your production schedules, the waste management should just be part of that. I don't like to think of it as an add-on. It should just be steeped within each process. And so we help people do that and identify. I think it's really easy, and I'm guilty of it with the Bulb, is you've got your blinkers on because you're so into something and you can't really see like out of what you do. And so just bringing in that external person to go, actually, this is where you could make some efficiencies, or this is where resource could be better spent, is probably, it's always a good thing. And I need the same with the Bulb always. You know, it's healthy to do that. So yeah, that's where we work. Well,
it sounds like it. What I've enjoyed hearing about from you in particular has been this that ability that you seem to have to assess yourself and your own progress as you're going along, assessing other people and other people's progress, and that strikes me as being a particularly healthy way of building a relationship with a consultant. It has been an absolute pleasure hearing about it from that way, and thinking about in my own way, sustainability, etc. Making that part of the planning process from the word go seems like and building it in as a step by step seems to me like a takeaway that absolutely anybody should be able to just go back and reflect on after this presentation. So I think with that thinking point, that might be a good place for us to wrap up the discussion. In my usual fashion, we'll have information printed up alongside this interview to make sure that further questions do occur to us as a group afterwards have an opportunity to be aired. But beyond that, thank you so much for spending time talking us through these absolutely vital issues, Selina, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.